Microsoft released their earnings, which means we have new Xbox numbers. It's that time of the quarter where Microsoft is legally required to report their earnings for the latest quarter, and well, they knocked it out of the park. And so as Microsoft released their earnings late last night, and there are some new gaming numbers, but first let's just take a look at a super high level because the company officially crushed it out of the park for your baseball analogies there. So at a high level, revenue was $45.3 billion. That is up an impressive 22% year over year. Net income, which this is dollars that go into their bank account, was at $20.5 billion, and their gaming revenue, specifically gaming, was $3.8 billion, up 33%. And as I am the official mini fridge unit converter, to convert those figures into mini fridge units, it was 435 million mini fridge units of revenue, 200 million mini fridge units of net income, and 38 million mini fridge units of gaming revenue. So you can sleep a little easier knowing that you have that mini fridge unit conversion under your belt. So let's dive into here a little bit more while I roll the B-roll of some of the Xbox specific numbers. So Microsoft is coming in and saying, hey, Xbox hardware revenue was up 166%. That is an impressive figure, but you got to keep in mind this is still comparing it to the last quarter of previous availability of the previous gen console, meaning that they hadn't launched their new hardware and they were about to in the following quarter. So that number, if it was anything other than impressive, would be very concerning. Keep in mind there's also the chip shortages and everything else going on, so it effectively may have potentially been higher, but we'll touch on that here in a second. Specifically, gaming revenue grew 16%, and their Xbox content and services rose 2%, or roughly was flat, which is probably the most concerning of all the figures. Now, across the board, everything was up, and it was a pretty healthy quarter for Microsoft, not only at a high level, but also on the gaming side. But Microsoft has told us a couple years ago, judge us on our content and services revenue, which was flat, which is primarily made up of Game Pass and Xbox Live, which means that they haven't added a ton of subscribers, which is also probably why Microsoft, unfortunately, did not give us any Game Pass numbers. This is still surprising, and now we're teetering on the okay, maybe there is a little bit of concern. Now, we did get a couple weeks, or was that last week or the week before, from their earnings note or calendar release that they're going to have here in November, where they do their annual shareholder meeting, that services were up and Game Pass growth has happened, but Microsoft is obviously keeping these numbers close to the chest because they're probably not worth trumpeting at this point. But I still struggle if Microsoft says judge us on our content and services, but they're not willing to detail that out. It just feels it doesn't feel genuine from what Microsoft has been promoting. But on the other side of the numbers that we do know that gaming revenue is doing exceptionally well for the company, and that they are seeing positive signs of growth across the board, especially when it comes to hardware and their services that they are doing. We just wish we had a little bit better insight. And for those of you hoping to understand how many consoles they sold, you are also going to be sitting here twiddling your thumbs like the rest of us, because neither in their earnings statements or in their earnings call did they detail out any specific numbers other than what I have already shared, which is unfortunate. It's not surprising. I would be surprised if, I don't think we will ever, honestly, I shouldn't say ever, but I'd be surprised if we did get console sales figures in the near future. The only way I think we'd ever get them is if Microsoft was in very close proximity to what Sony is announcing, and then we might get some, but they really keep saying, judge us on our Game Pass numbers, not on our hardware sales, because that's where they want to be. But then again, they don't give us his numbers. Either way, during the earnings call, Amy Hood, the company's CFO, said that they were, in fact, able to ship more Xbox Series X and S consoles than they initially expected, even though there is that chip supply issue, which is a good sign for gamers, unless you still haven't been able to get one. I did a quick check before recording this. It's still quite hard to get your hands on one if you're not readily available, watching the bots and all that stuff that pump out tweets about saying, hey, there's availability here or there. That still remains your best way to get one. You're just not able to go into Best Buy or wherever else and pick one up off the shelf yet. But the fact that they were able to build more than they expected means that maybe that supply constraint is starting to ease just a little bit. Although we've been hearing sort of the inverse, though, from companies like AMD and Intel, who expect that the chip supply constraints to continue into potentially 2023 even. So I don't know. Hopefully, maybe we're on the very, 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 very early leading edge of starting to see some supply constraints sort of relax, but as a whole, it still doesn't look like we are there yet. Satya Nadella, the company's CEO, said that they had record first quarter monetization engagement for the company with gaming. They said they have the biggest lineup of content and exclusive games ever coming this holiday. And he also revealed that Bungie is relying on Microsoft's cloud to scale and operate its game, which is on the enterprise side. But that is all good for their gaming genre and gaming market because it continues to grow. And that is a big, big bet for Microsoft these days. And the company also finished out saying they expect Xbox content and service revenue growth, which is their key factor here, to be in the mid-teens for Q2, which is going to be their biggest launch quarter ever, they believe, because they have Age 4, they've got Forza Horizon 5, they've also got Halo Infinite, and there's other things popping in and out of the service. So look for a big quarter here coming up, which makes sense. I mean, if you think about everything that Microsoft is lining up for, they need to have the end of the year, the end of the calendar year, be their biggest year, because they're going to have, they should see solid sales, even year over year. I would expect to be up because they should be able to produce more consoles, and they'll also be on sale for the entire quarter year over year. So we should see hardware growth, and then Microsoft is really banking on the Xbox Game Pass will continue to add value with these new titles, and that's going to entice people to be jumping in this holiday season. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again. It's such a good value that you get your son or daughter or whoever a console and say, look, I didn't want to buy you all these games, so here's $15, and you get a whole month of Halo. You can get Forza, you can get whatever you want through Game Pass, and that's all you got to pay in addition to that month. For parents who don't want to spend a whole bunch during the holiday shopping season, which I totally understand as a parent myself, this is a pretty good way to spread out some of that cost over the year rather than having to chunk down. Because if your daughter, son, whoever wants Halo Infinite and they want the multiplayer and single player, so there's $60. They want at least $60, I should say. And if they want Forza, there's $120, and that really adds up quickly. And so Game Pass, again, is a tremendous value. I think some of the numbers here that Microsoft isn't sharing is what makes it a little concerning, because it's like, guys, just come on, share the details, even if I think they're afraid of the bad press. And the reality is Microsoft is so massive with $45.3 billion in revenue and $20.5 billion in net income that Game Pass is just a very small fraction, and it's probably not what's considered material, meaning like if it went away, it would dramatically impact operations of the company. And so it more than likely is not material to the company. That's why they're keeping things close. But at the end of the day, they're not sharing this. So overall, there's a lot of optimism inside the world of Xbox right now. I mean, they saw solid revenue growth for the quarter. You got to keep in mind that this is from July, August, and September. So not exactly the hot months for gaming. Typically, we see that heat up here in this current quarter as things cool off for most of the people in the northern hemisphere. The gaming typically sees a bump, and then that should ride all the way into the spring, typically just because then people go back outside and play outside in real life. So it'll be interesting to watch to see. I think this is going to be a really pivotal quarter, and I'm hoping that Microsoft will share these Game Pass numbers potentially after this quarter. But as of right now, we're still floating around a bit. It's got to be somewhere between 20 and 30 million, where that number is, I'm pretty confident, somewhere in there. But I would be surprised if it was at 30, like they had alluded to through that Phil Spencer interview, because if it was at 30, I can almost guarantee that Microsoft probably would have been trumpeting that fact that, hey, it's like we're at 30 million, but they didn't. So, here we are again, twiddling our thumbs. So wrapping things up here, good quarter for Xbox. Gaming revenue was up, console sales were up, subscriptions roughly flat, and so there's a lot coming down the pipeline here. Game Pass continues to add titles at a very quick pace. This is going to be a pivotal quarter. This is the quarter to watch, because you can't really line up too much more excellent AAA, Quad A content, whatever you want to call it, with Age 4, Forza, and Halo all launching in back-to-back months. Microsoft has a stellar lineup. The question will be, will that move more Xbox units? I think it will. Will it get more people into Game Pass? I think it will. And so there's going to be some justification after this as we reflect back. Is launching 3 AAA titles or Quad A titles, whatever you want to call them, in back-to-back months, does that drive Game Pass subscriptions? Microsoft is betting on the fact that it is yes, but only time will be the true test here, is how long will those people stay and how many people can they sign up? Because if Microsoft can prove that launching titles back-to-back has a massive positive impact to Game Pass numbers, then we will likely see that strategy continue. If it doesn't, we might see Microsoft retool or refactor or rethink about how they're positioning Game Pass with title launches and how they're going to approach that. As I like to say, time will be the true test here, and if you want to see how things shake out, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.